So we've got Nathan, the HubSpot expert here, who is going to help us to understand the leads in HubSpot. And so without further ado, Nathan, I'm going to pass it over to you.
You guys are rock stars. Thank you so much. Um, so I hesitate to say that anybody is a total expert in HubSpot. As you guys know, it is such a wide and deep platform. There's so much to learn. There's always new features and functionality being released. Heads up to anybody being inundated with product updates. And if you haven't, remember, there's a beta. If you're an admin in your HubSpot portal, sign up for those weekly product update summaries. Sends an email right to your inbox. And I've been using that a lot to stay on top of all of the new features that are constantly being added and improved, like in the platform. Today, we're going to be focusing on one of those new-ish features, which is leads. I think leads came out approximately a year ago. They're still a little bit new. There's still, I think, a little bit of getting used to them, like that's going on. But today, hopefully, will give you a better understanding of what exactly leads are and how you can use them. This has been presented by, of course, the LGBTQIA plus Hug and Digital Reach Online Solutions. Definitely, please join the Hug chapter if you haven't already. And there is also a really helpful Slack that you can join too. So just a couple of resources here for you guys. Like if you want to follow up on those and engage a little bit more, this is a great place to do it on Slack. So today, right, my goal is to give you all some insight into leads and help you figure out when and where to use leads. Like, are they a fit or are they maybe still not a fit for your sales process? We're going to look at exactly what leads are and what the reason is for this being introduced in HubSpot. And then we're going to hop into a little demo just so that we can see how would we maybe set up leads in a HubSpot portal given a particular scenario, I guess. So first things first, just a little bit about me really quickly. My name is Nathan DeLong. I am a principal solutions engineer at HubSpot. I am part of our corp slash upmarket team. And I am coming up on my 3-year HubSpot anniversary. Prior to being at HubSpot, I've worked as an SE at 2 other companies, both locally here in where I'm located, which is Grand Rapids, Michigan. I currently live just outside of Grand Rapids in Allendale with my husband, Jason, and we also have a French bulldog named Winston. I hate to be so stereotypical, but of course we have a French bulldog, right? And I like long walks, but I like HubSpot even more. And one thing, again, I am not a total HubSpot guru. I'm always learning just like everybody else in our community, right? So I am not ever going to be the person who's like speaking on behalf of HubSpot. If you are in doubt about anything, please reach out to HubSpot support. Check out the HubSpot community pages, check out the knowledge base. But everything I'm going to give you guys is sort of like my take on things and my spin on things. So, first things first, I think when we're first introduced in HubSpot, and first things first, when the leads object was introduced, I think that it created some confusion because Salesforce is really well known for having a leads object. I know that oftentimes I am the technical resource on competitive deals where folks might currently have Salesforce and they are contemplating moving over to HubSpot. And Salesforce has this concept of a lead. Some other CRMs that you guys might run into or have experience with also have a concept of leads. So, for example, I know that Copper does. I know that Microsoft Dynamics is this concept of a lead. But in Salesforce, and actually in a lot of other CRMs, a lead is sort of this temporary holding area. So it's almost like their concept of a lead is this is like a temporary object because it's somebody that we don't know enough about to actually call them a contact yet. So Salesforce, they call out in their documentation, a lead is an individual or an organization that has expressed interest in your product or service. And if we kind of think about that, that is a very different sort of way of working to HubSpot, where with HubSpot, as soon as we create a contact manually, or as soon as a contact converts, say, on a HubSpot form, they are a contact, right? We know already that they have expressed interest, and we can actually view, especially if we're talking about somebody who's converted, we know their source. We know what pages they viewed. We know what kind of marketing nurture they might have engaged with. Maybe they clicked through, say, from a social post or an ad. It's a little different with Salesforce because that lead, instead of like HubSpot, where we have this contact, which is meant to be sort of a cradle to grave record of individuals' interactions with us, in Salesforce, those leads are really more of a standalone object. They're created one time and they follow through a process of qualification, but it only occurs once. So once they become a contact, you would never be able to sort of undo that conversion or use a lead with that contact again if you need to, say, qualify them again in the future for maybe a different product line or maybe a different service. Once they're a contact, they're a contact. So again, when we have this idea of a lead being essentially unassociated with a contact record, we do run into some potential drawbacks. First things first, you can't undo it. So if somebody was qualified, they became a contact, and then we decide, well, maybe we shouldn't have qualified them, or maybe they really aren't a fit. It's sort of too late, right? We can't ever go back to them just being a lead. Once the contact record is there, they're a contact kind of forever, right? And then if you have that need to requalify someone because there's a different kind of engagement that we're going to have over the sales side of the house, right? We can't do that by creating another lead because in a system where those leads are divorced from contacts, what we always have is the sort of one-way street from lead to contact. And if we need to qualify someone again, we can't use a lead. We'll have to think of some other method, right, for accomplishing that, if any. When leads get converted, they sort of magically recede into the background. They can be accessible with reporting, but it can be a little bit murky to fully understand, well, what steps did that lead go through to become a contact, right? We don't have like this idea of here's the contact record, here's like their lead that's associated with it, right? The lead is sort of pushed into the background. And then the last thing, leads can accidentally sort of turn into your kitchen junk drawer in your CRM, right? Leads who don't get converted, they might start to pile up. And essentially, they might have situations where maybe the BDR decided not to follow up with one of them, and they're gonna leave that for later, quote unquote, later, right? Later might never come, and what can happen is suddenly in your CRM, you have lead records that might be years old. And it starts to get confusing as far as like, should we focus on any of these? Should we retarget or reach out again to any of these? Because there's such a pile of them that they get really complicated to start sorting through and understanding. why last year did we have this lead that we never followed up with? And that's not really helping us close that loop between marketing and sales, where essentially marketing is saying, I'm pulling these leads in, be they from events, be they from, the different content that we're putting out online. I'm sort of handing them up to you, but I can't really see that you're following through on the sales side. And also in HubSpot, there is, again, right, this sort of core belief that we should have a single object that represents an individual. That single object should encompass the totality of that individual's interactions with our company. That kind of led to, well, then there is no lead object in HubSpot because it just adds confusion, right? If we do it the way that, say, Dynamics or Salesforce or Copper or some other CRM handles leads, that's going to really muddy things up. And so we're simply not going to do it. And instead, the solution was, well, we have life cycle stages, and then we also have this property in HubSpot called lead status. The problem with that is it's going to still cause some drawbacks because just taking away the concept of the lead because we want to have this single record for an individual doesn't really solve the problem of how do we get visibility into how sales is qualifying, right? And the idea of just using these properties for either a life cycle stage or lead status, it leads to kind of a clunky process when we're talking about prospecting and qualifying leads or contacts to do business with us. Like a lot of people working out of views, right? Like I have to have a view in HubSpot of all of the contacts that are currently in my MQL lifecycle stage. And I have to have a view of all these different lead statuses that I might have set up. And it just is clunky. It's hard for folks to focus. Things can go sort of unworked or get missed if you have somebody working out of 5 or 6 different contact views. That's just kind of the way it is. And the last thing is because we have those properties, as lead status changes, it's still just one property that's changing, right? We can't really build a lead funnel because we have that property only. And it can be kind of tricky in HubSpot to report on historical property values. It's not particularly intuitive. It's not really a great solution to allow us to say, how are those leads progressing through our qualification process? Just if we have that property history. So, both ways have issues. Having the lead as a standalone object is tricky. It can lead to things piling up, can lead to things not being worked. And it's, again, one time ever, we're going to say that we qualified somebody. HubSpot's way makes it really tricky to do reporting. Either way is going to lead to issues between, say, marketing and sales, right? On the one hand, if we have leads in a standalone object, marketing is going to get frustrated that there's 5,000 lead records that have never been converted into contacts. On the other hand, if marketing has to sort of rely on just 2 properties to determine if a contact has been qualified, that's not going to work either. And then the last thing I'll say too on that point, using deals in HubSpot to try to kind of overcome that might make the sales team somewhat dissatisfied because we're essentially saying, well, go ahead and create a deal for every contact that gets passed to you. By the way, there might be a good percentage of those deals that are just going to go close lost, not because we weren't doing our job in sales or anything like that, but simply because that was the only vehicle that we have to sort of track the qualification. And I will say I've become more and more in the camp of saying a deal shouldn't be created until we actually have a shot at winning it. We shouldn't create a deal simply for the purpose of saying, well, we need something to track our follow up with this contact. I don't think that that's a good use for deals because I think that that sort of artificially inflates your closed loss rate, right? Because of all of this, I think HubSpot sort of went back to the drawing board and thought a little bit about how can we do both? Get visibility into our lead funnel. Make sure that leads don't serve as sort of like, again, a junk drawer. Make sure too that we still hold on to this core concept in HubSpot that a contact or a company record, again, is from the very beginning that that company or contact became known to us all the way through to the present day without missing any activities or any engagements that have occurred, right? So, hence the lead object. First of all, with this leads object in HubSpot, there's always going to be an associated contact and company and or company record, right? A lead is never going to exist on its own in HubSpot. You must have that other record as your source of truth. Also, you can have multiple leads associated with a contact and company. And what that really allows you to do is run that same contact or company through your qualification process. So we sold them product A or we sold them service A. Now we want to qualify them later for product B or service B. And we can absolutely do that because we have that ability to use a lead associated with that contact or company multiple times. Finally, once those leads are qualified, they do not disappear. They're always going to be visible right from the contact or company record in HubSpot. So there's no confusion about where did this come from? Have they ever been qualified? Has, say, our BDR team or our SDR team ever followed up with this particular contact or company? We can see that and it is never hidden. So, the definition of leads in HubSpot is it is a record to represent and track the process that a sales rep or a BDR or an SDR is going to go through to qualify a contact or company before they become an opportunity and a deal record is created. Because again, and I will say again, I am very firmly in the camp, don't create a deal record just to qualify. You should only create a deal record once you've determined that there's an actual opportunity there, because otherwise I feel like it's just so unfair to sales to say, yeah, you have this really low closed won rate because essentially we're making deals before we even know if we're a fit or not for this particular potential customer. Just a little diagram. Um, we have this engagement phase like in our prospecting, right? And we have that source. So they maybe came through inbound, or maybe it's an outbound too, right? Hey, our sales team, they went to an event, got a lot of business cards. That's how they sourced all of these leads that we're then going to go ahead and follow up with, right? And then only once they're qualified are they going to get into our pipeline. Once they're qualified, we'll go ahead and make a deal. But through that qualification process, that prospecting process that we're doing, they're just going to be a lead. We're not going to go create a deal right off the bat. And if you think about it, we have those life cycle stages, right? So your life cycle stages might look different, but essentially, this is a new person. This is marketing qualified. This is sales qualified. Now they're an opportunity because we have a deal created, and now they're a customer because the deal went closed won, right? Happening though inside of this like sales qualified lead or whichever life cycle stage you're using to represent that stage, we're sort of losing out, right, on information like, did you connect with them? Did you try? Did you make that connection? Did they say, "Yes, I would like to continue talking with you"? You can't see that from just a life cycle stage. But with this lead object, now all of a sudden you can say, yeah, these are the folks who we were able to qualify. These are the folks that we were able to connect with. These are the folks that we disqualified. It's just giving this extra layer of visibility into our prospecting motion. Okay. So, again, what do leads make HubSpot better at? Tracking contacts and companies and how they're proceeding through our qualification process. Letting us say things like, how many times have we qualified a contact or company? Especially great, again, multiple products, multiple services, slightly different qualification requirements. Like if you think of, say, like a financial institution like a bank, right? Your qualification process for somebody who is getting like a business loan might be different from somebody who's qualifying for business checking, right? Those might have different steps and different stages. And with leads, we can track those separately. And then we can also at any time be able to know exactly how many contacts or companies are sitting in each stage of our qualification process. And tied with that, we can track the qualification activities of our sales team. So, in other words, we can know, are these worked? Are you working these leads or are they sitting unworked? And we can actually use automation too to say, hey, you haven't worked this lead. Let's assign it to somebody else who's going to work it. We aren't sort of like just adding them to that junk drawer. And then finally, I do think that leads make HubSpot a more natural fit for folks who are doing qualification. Now, in some places, that might just be the sales rep. It's all in one, right? I'm sales rep. I do the qualification. I decide whether or not that they're going to be a fit. And then I go ahead and create a deal. On the other hand, if I have a BDR or SDR, it's even better for them because it gives them a place to focus their activities that isn't just rolled into that darned contact or company record. They actually have their own object that can be tracked. So, again, just a little comparison here too of that old lead status. Like with lead status, it's literally like just pick from the drop down what's going on right now. Are they in progress? Are they new? Are they completed? Whatever that may be. That is super hard to visualize, right? It's just this property sitting on your screen. With leads, we can actually show like this sort of pipeline, right? These are the different steps of my qualification process. And this is exactly where this particular lead is sitting in that process. I feel like this is, first of all, this is better for reporting. And also, this is something that I think is more friendly for like sort of like us humans, right? Because we can see visually for each and every lead, okay, this is where they're at. They're at step 2 of 4 or whatever the case may be. And then just to show here too, right? We can have multiple leads that are associated with the same contact or company, which is super helpful again. If we have maybe multiple BDRs working the same contact, or we have different things that we're offering them and trying to get them qualified for. So, the way I like to think about these leads is just like imagine if HubSpot didn't have a deals object, but instead you just had a property on contacts and companies that said, yes, there's a deal. It would be chaos, right? You would lose that really nice Kanban view of your sales pipeline. You would lose the ability to see, are there multiple deals going on with a contact or company? And that's kind of where prospecting has been with HubSpot, right? This is where um this is where leads can be such a game changer because again, we can now sort of see how effective is our prospecting and stay on top of it, not have to worry about doing anything that isn't going to be written back to our contact or company records. And we can start to see that pipeline and that lead funnel as well, which was pretty much impossible without properties. So I just tell folks think of leads as a deal for your prospecting process, right? And they're helping us solve for anybody who's doing prospecting in Sales Hub and who kind of understands that the way that's based in properties is clunky and the way of just creating a deal every time is unfair. Because again, we don't want to create a deal just because you came across our desk. We want to make sure that we create a deal when we actually have a shot at winning the business. And then next thing, talk a little bit, right, about how do these work with life cycle stages. And you can think about this in a couple ways. And I'll tell you guys like which my favorite is too after we've looked at both. You might have something where if marketing has generated this contact record, so somebody came to our blog, they converted on a form, marketing sourced it, right? All right. At some point, they're going to be an MQL. Like they get a certain lead score, whatever happens, and then we create a lead object. On the other hand, if it's something like I'm on the sales team, I just went to an event. I have like all these business cards, right? So I create all these contacts. Maybe those become SQLs, right? And then you can really start to see what leads are being generated because of marketing activities and what leads are being generated from sales activities. So this could be one way that you can break that out. On the other hand, you might have something where you just have this qualified lead lifecycle stage. In this case, right, the way that you would report on what marketing is contributing to leads versus what sales is contributing to leads would really probably be something like the source, right? What is like the record source? Was it like maybe an import? That might be a clue that it's from sales. On the other hand, right, if their original source is something like organic social, well, that sounds like marketing, right? I think that there are pluses and minuses to both ways. I think that having like this sort of very streamlined life cycle stages, and then you're going back and essentially saying, I'm going to base my reporting around where they came from. You can do that, but there is definitely part of me that really likes the separate contact lifecycle stages, just because it's almost like sort of it's very separate, it's very defined. Either one of these, though, could be a good strategy. I think that you just need to think through how do you want to report, or even how important is it for you to report on what is essentially like an outbound type of lead, right? Where sales found it versus an inbound type of lead where marketing found it, right? Who's a good fit for leads? Anybody who uses Sales Hub and Marketing Hub. I think you're going to be a fit for leads, honestly. Um, but specifically to anyone who needs to track that sales qualification process and either qualify or disqualify contacts before you go make a deal, right? I think if you have a BDR team or an SDR team, this could be really, really helpful because it's giving them a specific place that they can work, right? A specific object that they're going to work with. And it gives them specific metrics as well that you can report on in HubSpot. And then if you're using an outbound motion in your sales process, I think leads make a lot of sense. And I think everybody should be using both outbound and inbound emotions. I know that HubSpot's whole ethos is we started with inbound, and by gosh, we're going to be inbound forever. I don't think that that's flexible enough. I think we need to have something like this leads object so that we essentially can admit that we do not just get inbound leads. No company just gets inbound leads. Like I built a blog and like all my 10,000 contacts, they just came from the blog and from my social posts. That's unrealistic when you're thinking of like a CRM, and a CRM should be flexible enough to also account for sales knows people, right? There's word of mouth, there's events, there's all kinds of methods that sales actually source of leads. And I think we should measure that. And then last but not least, be tolerant to change. Now, I will say like beta is a really crazy term at HubSpot because something can be in beta for like a year. And that doesn't really mean that the functionality is going to change in such a way that the functionality gets taken away, because by the time it gets to beta, it's really set, right? It's already been through private beta, it's been through like, internal UAT and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing I would say too is because leads are a new feature, you should be open to that feature being improved over time. And also be open to sort of managing your processes and changing your processes because this is a new functionality, right? How can we change our processes to maybe embrace, right, this new functionality? All right. So let's go ahead and go through a really quick demo. And I'm building this just around a scenario for a specific hypothetical company. They are very originally called ABC Incorporated. They're a company that has both inbound and outbound sales processes. And the issue is they're having trouble managing the handoff between marketing and sales. And then within their sales department, they want to streamline the handoff of leads from their team of BDRs to their reps. So they have some goals where ideally marketing should be able to gauge a contact's readiness to be reached out to by a BDR. They're going to use lead scores, or they want to use lead scores to help manage that. Contacts who achieve a good engagement score, right, should be passed to the BDR team for that personalized one on one follow up and qualification. Then from the BDR team, they should only pass contacts to their reps once the contacts have been fully qualified. And then finally, last but not least, they want to report on their lead funnel so they can understand the impact their BDR team is having on their business. So, with all of those different goals in mind, let's go ahead and hop into their HubSpot portal. Okay. The first thing is I'm going to want to go hop over to my settings here in HubSpot. And then under objects, we have leads. Of course, just like every other object in HubSpot, all of my lead settings live right here. And there are a couple of settings that I really recommend looking at before you implement leads, like looking at and thinking about how you want to use these. First, there's an option here to sync lead owners with contact or company owners. It's fine to leave this on in some situations, but if you have multiple owners for your contacts and companies in HubSpot, I would really recommend just turn it off. And that's because when it's turned on and I use my create record action in a workflow to create that lead, I don't have the ability to set the lead owner on those new records because they're locked to whoever the primary owner is for the contact or the company that my lead is associated with. That's not going to work for ABC Incorporated because they have a BDR team. their contacts and companies have a BDR owner, right? Their primary contact owner is actually the sales rep. And sales reps at ABC do not work with leads. They let their BDRs do the qualification of new contacts first, and then they hand that over to their sales reps. Let's go ahead and look at a contact just to sort of outline how this works. The contact I'm going to pick on is someone named Jill Kingsley. And when we look at our contact record here for Jill Kingsley, if I go look at my About This contact, this is where Jill has a contact owner, right? That contact owner is the sales rep. She also has a BDR owner who is Diego. So again, I don't want this setting here turned on because otherwise, when I say, oh, Jill has a really good engagement score, let's go create a lead record for her. I don't want that lead record to be assigned to Nathan DeLong. I want it to be assigned to Nathan's BDR, Diego, right? If we go back over to our lead settings tool, there's one other setting that I've turned off, and that's for syncing lead activities. I don't want only lead owner activities being synced from the contact or company to the lead. I don't want to limit my activity syncing in that way. And then if we go under pipelines and then we hop into automate, there's one other setting that I am turning off. And that's when a contact moves to a lifecycle stage. Because ABC Incorporated, right, our pretend company, they get that they could use their scoring model in HubSpot to change contact lifecycle stages. But the thing is, they don't want to accidentally create leads just because that life cycle changes on the contact. They only want to base lead creation on scoring. So again, on Jill's contact record here, I can see that we've got all of our building blocks so that we can achieve this goal of essentially getting leads to BDRs when someone hits a specific score. Because I have my BDR owner, I've already updated my settings so that HubSpot doesn't try to like give it to the sales rep, right? I have my engagement score here. And then if we look at that lead scores settings, so let's hop over to lead scoring. By the way, if you guys aren't using it already, this is the new way of scoring leads in HubSpot. So it could look different if you're using score properties. Just a heads up, are going to be those are going to be sunset. So you'll be using instead this new lead score method. But if we go ahead and look at this score, I've essentially said anyone from 0 to 49, it's really low. My medium is 50 to 74. But then here, if they've got at least 75 points on this score, that's where I want to go ahead and move that person to now be a lead, right? So with all of the pieces in place to meet what ABC wants to do, which again, once someone hits a specific score, give them to the BDR, not to their rep, right? That stuff is all in place. So now all I have to do is go ahead and create a workflow. And then this will be a contact based workflow, of course. And essentially, what we're going to do with this workflow is we're going to set up our triggers. And in my case, it's going to be based on filter criteria because we have our score. There's our contact engagement score. And let's do greater than or equal to 75, right? Because that's sort of like my top tier for this particular score. And one thing too to note for this initial handoff, this is why I'm automating it, right? Because they've I'm saying that this scenario is when somebody has done something that leads marketing to say, okay, they're ready now to be handed off to sales. For future leads that are associated with contacts, those can be created manually by a rep or by a BDR if they have the permissions to do so. But what they're not going to do is use this workflow. There's actually sort of a safety catch in HubSpot where this trigger doesn't re-enroll. So, in other words, this is my initial handoff. And then I can make sure that if Jill continues to sort of engage with us from the marketing side, we're not going to just automatically dump more leads out there for her, right? Instead, we can leave that up to our sales team and our BDR team. Next thing we'll do is let's go ahead and use our create record action. The kind of record that we're going to create is a lead. We can determine, right, is this like sort of medium, low, high priority? Well, let's say that it's medium. And then we can, of course, have multiple lead pipelines in HubSpot, right, with different steps in each. I'm going to put these into my lead pipeline as new. And then the next thing that we'll do is we can add more properties. In this case, we're going to do lead owner. And this is really important, right? If you have both BDRs and sales reps, this is where you will not have this option if you leave in our setup here. If this sync is on, you won't have this option in your workflow. So just heads up. So we're going to set that lead property lead owner. We're going to assign them to an existing owner of the contact. And it's going to be our BDR owner, right? And honestly, that's all there is to it. This is our workflow that's going to, as simple as this, say, once somebody hits this particular score, create a lead and assign it to the BDR owner for that contact. And then as that BDR, I can hang out in the sales workspace in HubSpot. I'm going to get notifications as these leads come through, right? So for example, some that have been active, I'm going to be also notified as soon as those new leads are being assigned to me. And I have nice little links here under my guided actions to reach out. I can also, of course, work with them right from my leads tab. And one other thing to note too, if your BDRs are sort of the traveling type, the mobile app in HubSpot does now support feeds. So that way, if we have folks who are BDRs, SDRs, or again, if we have reps that are doing this qualification too, they have access to all of these lead records right from their phone as well. iPhone or Android, right? Either way works. Any of these leads, I can, of course, go select multiple, push them into sequences. If I want to look at one in particular, easy as clicking on them. I'm going to have that lead stage tracker to let me know what stage of my qualification process these folks are hanging out in. And again, because leads are not a separate object from contacts or companies, right? In my case, I'm using contacts mostly for my lead process, but you can use companies too. You will always have that base record that has all of our engagements, right? We're never going to totally divorce like the idea of, well, there's this lead object and it has like activities. Then we have this totally separate contact object with even more activities. All the activities should be going back to that contact and company. And then I talked about how this helps with reporting, right? Because once my BDRs take these folks and they're engaging with them and they get them through to being qualified, they're creating a deal. And it's at that point that my sales rep is notified, hey, you have a live one here, right? And then I think the other important thing too to note is if you have the permissions to do so, you can also view all leads, not just ones that are assigned to you, right? So that can really help if you want to make sure to assign these to an owner. The other thing that can be helpful too is if we are worried about something like maybe we have leads that are not being followed up on in a timely fashion, make a lead based workflow, right? Your trigger is going to be essentially like last activity. And then we're going to say, maybe it was more than 30 days ago, or maybe there is no known last activity. And then you can do a reassignment action too. And then last thing I said, earlier, the old way of managing leads in HubSpot makes it really hard to report on your lead funnel. Well, now because we have that object right here in your built-in sales analytics reports, there's your lead funnel. And you can see the lead owner, how many leads they have, how many are open, how many are in progress, and then what their conversion rate is too. Can also, of course, have a report of your average lead response time and make sure those are getting turned around efficiently. That's my whole thing. I know it takes a minute to go through and describe all of this. There's probably more I could say too, but that in a nutshell is leads in HubSpot.
Thank you, Nathan. So I see some questions already in the chat. They were popping up throughout. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in now. One of the questions is, what is the best way to visualize leads that do not have a lead owner for the purpose of assigning an owner?
For that, I would recommend going here and going to all leads. And then you can use your advanced filters or just pull in your column here for like lead owner. Either of those should be able to help you do that. You should have the ability to view all leads regardless of owner if you have the permission set up to do so. And I would say too, last thing too, like if you're having any struggle with that, definitely reach out to support and they can help you.
Oh, sorry, the chat's jumping around on me. How do qualified leads help in marketing campaigns?
So a qualified lead, the way that you would see that impact in your marketing campaign is once they get a deal created, right? And then once they go ahead and have that deal closed won, right? Now, what you could do though, too, you could pull in some lead information, maybe into a journey report or something like that. And if you want to see out of all of the folks who interacted with this marketing campaign, who are the ones that actually became qualified leads, you could build reports to do that as well. Um, and then let me see here. Any plans to enable us to customize the left-hand side of the leads list the same way you have in Help Desk with a custom filter? Do you mean like these advanced filters that you can use? Like this, sticky? Because it almost sounds like what you'd want to the list on the left. Open lead start. Oh, this over here. I understand. They may introduce that at some point in time. But I don't have visibility into when they're gonna do that, but they very well could do something like that. Mhm.
Okay. Another question is, do you have plans to create multiple pipelines in the future?
Yeah, like, so if we go here and hop into our settings, and let's go down to our leads object, and then sort of like on deals, right? We've got setup and then we have pipelines. We can go here and create a pipeline. So we could create additional lead pipelines if we want to.
Okay. And I think we just have two more questions left that we can hopefully get through quickly. One is about they were surprised about phone number, email not syncing from the contact to the lead. So when they created custom properties on the lead to make sure phone and emails were in the list view, I guess their SDRs made hundreds of calls each day. So then they were surprised that when they opened the preview and click call. So are there any plans to sync the contact info from the contact to the lead?
Let's go take a look at a lead here. And then Vicky, if you don't see that option, make sure to check in your product updates in your portal. There should be one for multiple lead pipelines, maybe waiting for you even. And if there isn't now, there will be shortly, depending on whether it's a phased rollout or not. But check your product updates. Let's take a look at these leads here. So this is my lead, Jim. You should have a phone number that's something like 438-7456 or something like that. Let's go see. Yeah, 7654. I just created Jim yesterday. He's actually for a demo, like later this afternoon. His phone number did come over, right? If you have more specifics about like what you meant by the phone number, whoever asked that one, let me know. Like, yeah, just throw it in the chat or whatever works best for you.
So while we wait to get more context there, we have a question from Stacy. Is there an
Mhm.
easier way to find leads, like a drop down on CRM, like deals? At the moment, you have to go to your sales workspace dashboard and click leads at the top.
Yep. That is 100% still the thing with it. Like, if I were to go here over to my contacts, and then if I scroll through, you'll notice like leads do not pop up here yet. That is one of those things where I said you have to be a little tolerant. So it's a new feature. I suspect that they are going to do things like that, yes, and do some of that sort of housekeeping. Anything like leads don't show up yet and is like their own thing, the way contacts do, or the way deals do, or the way companies do. I think that's like a housekeeping thing. Also, the thing about like some of the like difference of like editing fields within a lead object. I think that that is another one that is ripe for fixing, right? Or ripe for some like housekeeping. Now, one thing I will say, if you say are pulling in like whatever columns you have related to your leads, right? And you might have one that is more editable, right? Remember, you do have like your inline editing here as well. That could potentially be a way to make it a little easier to edit fields on that lead object. So using the inline editing, pulling in the column, maybe that you're interested in changing, and then using inline editing. That might help a little bit, Stacy.
Thank you. And Vicky said what you showed earlier solved her issue. She joined the beta. So, well,
Yay.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know we're a few minutes over. Really, really appreciate you being here, Nathan, and sharing all of this with us. I know we weren't able to get to every single question just because of time. So again, like Nathan said, if there's anything you're still wondering about, feel free to reach out to HubSpot, or also feel free to reach out to me or the group at Digital Reach, and we might have those answers for you as well. So we're happy to field questions after this in the future, like I said at the beginning of the call. Oh, there's a question, Nathan, about how to contact you. Do you want people to maybe connect with you on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Nathan DeLong, and that's a great way if you want to connect there. If you have questions about implementing specific HubSpot features or functionality, defs reach out to your CSM or support. They're going to be a way better resource for that kind of stuff. But if you just want to connect, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everyone.